Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar. Today I want to start off with just saying that I never intended to make a TikTok video so soon. But, this is an interesting development for me because, ladies and gentlemen, as somebody on this channel, one of my pillars of content, aside from, other random stuff, is always talking about computer security, your safety, and making sure that your data is owned by you, okay? I live in a world where I like to pretend that nobody can spy on me, but that's not real, okay? Every time you connect to the internet, there's always some company, somebody who's just creepily looking at you so they can sell you more advertisements, okay? It's a wild, weird world we live in. Now, to try and stop it as much as we can is generally the only goal that I have. If you can learn to protect yourself even 5%, that's better than just protecting yourself at a rate of 0. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to call out one comment. Wait, so with all this going on, Muda is silent with TikTok? I thought he told us TikTok was dangerous, or was that just his typical sensationalism? Or is TikTok actually privacy intrusive? So far, what I've seen is that this whole time it wasn't, and Muda was profiting off of fear-mongering views and clicks. Now, I want to start off by saying that this is a little bit wild, also disingenuous. Did I ever say that TikTok was dangerous? If you ever watch every single video I made regarding TikTok, one of the most, literally 30-40% of each of those videos always consists of telling you whatever TikTok is doing that is claimed to be spying is something that Facebook and various other companies are doing. In fact, every tech company does this. Generally, my viewpoint has always been, if you find this TikTok to be creepy, if you find this behavior to be weird, you should be protecting yourself from everything. In fact, the last time I covered this, one of my big points was that the law, the government, the actual regulators in this moment were actually focused in the wrong idea. Instead of banning TikTok, instead of, completely stopping it, we should regulate the flow of data between our devices to these various companies, because that's the only way to stop it, okay? It's not TikTok you have to be worried about, it's the whole system. But let's look at TikTok in particular, okay? So recently it's been in front of Congress. A lot of lawmakers from both sides of the aisle have come in to grill TikTok, and they have no friends. In fact, there's no friends on that Republican side or the Democrat side or anything. In fact, the government does not like TikTok. So in order to make things a little bit short and get to the point that I want to make, I'm going to look at just a few choice snippets from this entire Congress piece that I found to be rather hilarious. It seems like the politicians in this case really didn't know the questions to ask, and I feel like a lot of them were trying to get sound bites. So I want to sit over here and kind of demystify. I'm not here to necessarily play devil's advocate. I'm just here to provide you with the best source of information regarding this topic. To get you a good idea of what kind of questions were being asked, one of them was, could TikTok access the home Wi-Fi network?
Does TikTok access the home Wi-Fi network?
Only if the user turns on the Wi-Fi. I'm sorry, I may not understand the...
So if I have a TikTok app on my phone and my phone is on my home Wi-Fi network, does TikTok access that network?
It will have to access the network to get connections to the internet, if that's the question.
Is it possible then that it could access other devices on that home Wi-Fi network?
Congressman, we do not do anything that is beyond any industry norms. I believe the answer to your question is no. It could be technical. Let me get back to you.
Okay, I'd appreciate it if you can answer that.
So this is one of those questions where I feel like the actual boomers behind this, people working in government, really didn't consult with anybody beforehand on what kind of questions they should be asking. Now, in this case, yes, TikTok can access your home Wi-Fi network. And a lot of this was probably looked at, they probably looked at their TOS when it came to data collection, and they found out, oh no, TikTok can look into a bunch of different things on my devices and network. Now, the reality is, this is not as spooky as it sounds. Obviously, TikTok's application and their website will have to access your network connections in order to, connect to the internet and get you those short-form videos you like so much. The other reality is can it access other devices on your home system? Now, the answer to that is probably yes, depending on the functionalities of the app. If he had said that, it would have looked really bad and they would have started grilling him. But for instance, let me give you a good example. Imagine if you're on the YouTube app for your cell phone and you decide, I don't want to watch it on the small screen, let me cast it over to my big screen. Technically, that's the YouTube application interacting with other devices on your home network. Now, obviously, that is just an industry norm, like the CEO said. So, of course, if TikTok could do the same thing, obviously it can interact and interface with other devices on the home network. This isn't shocking information. This isn't wild. And honestly, this shouldn't even be the point of the matter. What should really be focused on is TikTok potentially exfiltrating US data over to the Chinese because of a national intelligence law. law. But we're going to get to that towards the later half of the video. I just want to go over through a few snippets that I found hilarious. So here's another one. This is kind of like just really insane behavior where somebody's trying to get a soundbite. Listen to this.
Colleague Representative Latta confirmed that your parent company, ByteDance, currently can access user data. Yes?
We have to be more specific.
Yes.
After Project Texas, no.
I'm not asking after Project Texas, I'm asking now. Yes.
Some user data is public data, Congresswoman, which means
you
everybody
confirm that.
can.
My
So again, you can kind of see in the attitude where she had like that big, like just annoying smile, like, yeah, I got you on a point. What point did you get the guy on? What, that user data could be accessed? Now, he was right. Some of the data was in fact public data. Anything you post on a social media service that is accessible by everyone in the world, okay, yeah, that's public user data that you're sending out there. That could be applicable to Facebook, that could be applicable to TikTok, that could be applicable to YouTube, Twitter, so on and so forth, okay? Whatever point that she was trying to get onto was kind of interesting, but she had decided to use this don't tread on me attitude and push it away. She didn't really ask the question in the right manner. In reality, what should really be asked is, was that American user data actually sent over to China? Was it subject to the national intelligence law of China? Could the parent company, ByteDance, actually come to the country, access the data, and exfiltrate whatever they wanted out of that area? That would have been a better question, and it's one that we'll be actually heading towards. Yes, user data, some of it can be public. The real question is, and she was right, she actually had one point, Project Texas. For those of you who don't know, Project Texas is sort of like TikTok's way to appease the government. Basically, what it means is all of the US user data is housed by Oracle, which is an American company. So basically, in their Oracle cloud infrastructure, they're able to handle and store that user data, those algorithms for the United States users. And a few people that I've talked to behind the scenes that I cannot name because of obvious anonymity have told me that a lot of these algorithms, a lot of these data sets are in fact owned by Oracle. They are stored entirely in the United States. However, it doesn't entirely confirm that somebody from China can't just come over and access those systems. There are cybersecurity practices in place. There are actual authentications in place to prevent, users from looking into data that they shouldn't. But generally, the answer was never, confirmed to me that obviously the Chinese couldn't just access all of that user data. One good example over here is this, from the Senate right over here, where they said, is it true that TikTok employees located in China currently have or had in the past access to U.S. user data? This could include programmers, product developers, data teams, as well as trust and safety and content moderation professionals. So, according to TikTok, employees outside the US, including China-based employees, can have access to the TikTok US user data subject to a series of robust cybersecurity controls and authorization approval protocols overseen by their US-based security team. So in addition, TikTok has an internal data classification system and approval process in place that assigns level of access based on the data's classification and requires approval to access the US user's data. So the solution that TikTok is implementing pursuant to Project Texas has focused on evaluating and revising TikTok's internal policies and operational controls in relation to US user data, to take steps to strengthen data security around US user data, and ultimately to make the organizational process and technical changes to help ensure compliance and enhance protection of US user data, defined as protected through engagement with CFI US. So obviously what TikTok is saying over here is, yes, there is access to user US data, right? There is access to it. However, there are apparently safeguards and authorization protocols in present by their US team to sort of stop the Chinese, operators to come in and access whatever they wanted willy-nilly. Now, of course, do I entirely believe that? No, I do not. But of course, that's something TikTok has stated. Now, of course, there is one thing to mention, that to this day, there has not been blatant 100% proof yet that the Chinese government has absolutely requested data entirely from TikTok. As far as we know, as far as I've seen, this hasn't been something that's entirely been confirmed. TikTok's privacy policies say you share data you collect with your parent company and affiliates. TikTok has long stored US user data in data centers in the US and Singapore, as well as in cloud-based services offered by AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure. Our Virginia data center includes physical and logical safety controls such as gated entry points, firewalls, and intrusion detection technologies. 100% of US user data is now trafficked and routed through Oracle Cloud infrastructure. We are still using our US and Singapore data centers for backup. Now, this is where the real problem comes into. Obviously, this is a giant what-if scenario, and where the data is geographically held is incredibly important. Now, if this data was in a Chinese server in Chinese space, obviously the data could be grabbed without, any question, right? The Chinese government could come down, and under the threats of national security and directives like that, they could definitely compel a company to act however they wanted. Now, the question here is, even if the data is geographically stored in the United States or Singapore, an agent that is from China could come and access it at any moment from the company. And obviously, it shouldn't be too hard to understand that the government could compel the parent company that owns ByteDance into actually digging up data if they wanted to. At the end of the day, they're operating in a country where they can be absolutely compelled to behave in any way they want. Otherwise, they risk closure, they risk possible arrests, fines, you name it. It's not like here in the United States where a country, if the country wanted a service to hand over data, there could be a legal back and forth to it. Now, that doesn't mean the company can't just hand over the data willy-nilly. It just means they have legal protections against the state from handing over something they don't necessarily want to. You've seen this in the past with things like Apple versus the FBI and so on and so forth. These kind of freedoms wouldn't happen in China. So the question is, even if the data is still held offshore, could the parent company that's still operating in Beijing be absolutely compelled? That's where the real crux of this argument comes into. Even within this entire statement, they have said that they've never handed over any data to. So the thing about this is you have to question if they were asked by the Chinese government through their parent company, if the pressure was put onto them, would they actually be honest about it? The reality is in 2017, June 2017, the National People's Congress of China had passed the National Intelligence Law in Beijing. So what this allows them to do is basically they have intelligence organizations and national intelligence work institutions. So again, according to the Canadian government over here that investigated this law, primarily because in Canada, when we had the Huawei ban and the Huawei thing, the whole situation with the Huawei company, it wasn't the fact that their phones were necessarily scary. There was a point where they were trying to invest and put the 5G technology all over the country. The question we had to ask was, if we had their infrastructure backboning us, could the Chinese government request Canadian data and have it exfiltrated to the Chinese government? Could they have backdoors in their own system that the government could take advantage of if they had utilized any of these national intelligence directives? So the National Intelligence Law contains a mix of continuity and change in how China protects state security and conducts intelligence. Like much of the past state security legislation, the law makes explicit what has long been done in practice. The most significant change relates to its institutional arrangements for intelligence work and empowering central state security leading bodies, with setting intelligence policy, providing guidance, and coordinating activities. The results, however, need to be watched to understand how the military intelligence system, the state and public security organs, and the CCP's organs come together. So again, the highlighting part here is requesting relevant organs, organizations, and citizens provide necessary support, assistance, and cooperation. Intelligence officials may enter relevant restricted areas and venues, may learn from and question relevant institutions, organizations, and individuals, and may read or collect relevant files, materials, or items. So again, in China, if you're hurting the actual government's name, if you're speaking against some of the people in power, they may actually consider you a national intelligence threat. And of course, one of the key cornerstones of this law is obviously because every individual, every company is subject to assist the state may come down and ask, TikTok or ByteDance or Douyin or any Chinese company to say, hey, give us the data we request because it's part of a national intelligence situation, a national security situation. At this point, denying the Chinese government may subject you to severe criminal penalties and may have you sent to a prison. I mean, let's just straight up say gulag at this point, where you're going to be spending the rest of your goddamn days. And it's not just TikTok that would necessarily be subject to this. Imagine, for instance, all of the video games we have from Tencent that have anti-cheat systems at the rootkit level, at the very ring zero level installed onto our systems. Could you imagine if all the data that they're collecting one day, imagine for any situation the Chinese government went down, knocked on anybody's doorstep and said, hey, listen, we need this data from this specific set because we have a pretense of national security. Obviously, I'm pretty sure Chinese companies don't want to be handling all that over because even they have some levels of ethics and morals, I have to imagine. But because of how the law is placed, they don't really have a choice. As much as the TikTok CEO doesn't want to give up that data, they ultimately will have to because they are compelled to by a national law. Now, it's really a shame as some of these politicians aren't going hand in hand and grilling and really focusing on that aspect even harder. In fact, here's another example you'll read from, just another representative. So let's listen to this.
The only face data that you'll get, that we collect, is when you use the filters to have, say, sunglasses on your face. We need to know where your eyes are.
Why do you need to know what the eyes are if you're not seeing if they're dilated?
And that data is stored on your local device and deleted after use if you use it for facial. Again, we do not collect body, face, or voice data to identify our users.
I find that hard to believe. It's our understanding that they're looking at the eyes. How do you determine what age they are then?
We rely on age gating as our key age assurance.
Age
gating, which is when you ask the user what age they are. We have also developed some tools where we look at their public profile to go through the videos that they post to see whether...
Well, that's creepy. Tell me more about that.
It's public. So if you post a video, you choose that video to go public.
So again, one of the questions over here was rather hilarious. So they were asking about what happens when filters are scanning your face, which is something that every social media service does. If they're scared by this, check out Instagram and Snapchat. They will all look at key points on the face, they will store them, and it'll be part of some machine learning algorithm. Obviously, I don't agree with the TikTok CEO saying that they may not store that information. They probably do to a certain extent. Again, you're going to have to open the books for that to be answered. But of course, when it comes to, these filters scanning your face, that's not something new. All right, that's not something wild. When he was asked about age gating, obviously a lot of these filters will probably look at the age you identified as and give yes. Now, obviously, they might use their algorithms to look through your public posts and actually try to verify your age that way, through machine learning or AI in this case. And that's not something new. A lot of people will probably lie about their age to get access to a service. And if they want to provide the best experience, they may look through public user videos. Like I said earlier, any video you post to any service is subject to severe scrutiny. If you think that any time you take advantage of Facebook, right, you upload a photo to their platform, or you upload a video to YouTube or TikTok, that those platforms are not scanning every pixel of that for some machine learning purpose or some data collection purpose on their end, you are sorely mistaken. Really, the actual arguments here should have been, let's focus on trying to restrict that data from even leaving the user's device, period. Now, there's also been a pushback from TikTok as well in the public eye. Some of the influencers over on TikTok came out, obviously because of their own pockets being completely destroyed if TikTok does get banned. But genuinely, I wanted to also come into it and offer their side as well. There's been some claims that Facebook or Meta has been pushing millions of dollars for lobbying campaigns against TikTok. And while it appears to have some weight to it, I saw other scenarios where people looked at the stock price and said, obviously Meta has a lot to gain. Don't get me wrong, Meta has done exceptionally well recovering from when we last saw them, up to a 65% positivity in terms of their stock price just with this year to date. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that Meta has actually started to whittle on back from their metaverse failures, with the whole helmets and whatnot. And they've decided to put their efforts into their social media services, generative AI, and again, more data collection, because that's where the money is for Facebook. And I read some of these articles that were referenced by the TikTokers, and at no point were they ever mentioning TikTok when it really came down to some of these lobbying efforts. For a lot of those lobbying efforts, a lot of those payments, it was related to a lot of antitrust situations that Facebook and a lot of other big tech organizations are currently involved in. For anybody that doesn't know the antitrust issues, there are a very small amount of companies that run pretty much the majority of internet and the services that we have around us. And so breaking them up is actually in the benefit of all of us versus allowing these guys to remain as large as they are and literally allowing no competition to get in. Do you ever wonder why there's only one major video sharing website, YouTube in this case, and there's not really anything else that can truly compete on the same level? It's because you're dealing with companies that are so large that anytime some competitor jumps in, they don't have enough services, they don't have enough money to actually distribute or compete at that similar level. They just can't. It's impossible. These websites operate on a loss and they're owned by even bigger companies and conglomerates that can afford to burden those losses. This is not a market for some new emerging player to jump jump into. And this is what should absolutely be looked into, and it is an entirely separate story. Now, of course, don't get me wrong, there's probably some questioning that maybe Facebook has some friends in the government, and to be sure, to understand everything into this situation, there has always been this presence that TikTok is a Chinese-owned application. Maybe data has been taken out from there. I just want to straight up say for the fact here, none of these services should ever be trusted. I would never trust TikTok, nor would I trust Facebook. But the crux of this argument is always relying on the fact that TikTok could be compelled by their parent company to siphon whatever data they want. Facebook at least has the ability to counter any request from the US government unless, they're completely compelled to and they lose in like a court of law, right? So on and so forth. But of course, that's the general crux. One is here in the US, where the data is again kept in the United States, and one is owned by a foreign company in China. That doesn't completely, negate the fact that Facebook is just as bad as TikTok when it comes to data collection and spying and privacy busting. But we're going to get to that, obviously, in a bit, too. Now, I want to just shift away and talk about tracking, okay? We looked at a lot of these like, TikTok hearing videos and we laughed at them. But in reality, the main crux of this argument is about tracking, is that US data being harvested and sent off to China. So the way that tracking works, most importantly, is like this. Now, every time, have you ever been on the internet and you're like, man, I talked about this so-and-so video game, and all of a sudden, all of my ads are about so-and-so video game. Maybe Alexa is listening on to me. It probably is, but in reality, you probably didn't just talk about it, you probably Googled it on your mobile device or entered it into a search field on your computer. So the way that this works is, anytime you interact and you search for things and you type things out or you do things on your computer, you're effectively going onto websites, and you're creating things known as cookies, which are small data files that are literally on your browser. Now, these things are designed so that they can store things for, later viewing. So for instance, if you go to a certain website and you select French as your language, it'll keep giving you French. If you go to a, online shopping site and you, purchase or you put things in your cart and you walk away from that website and you come back later and you're like, damn, everything is still in my shopping cart. It's because it's looking at the cookies. And it's actually just, it's a small little data file on your computer that's just there to help your specific browser work with that website in a much more, tangible way. So the thing about cookies is sometimes they can contain things like unique identifiers. And these aren't your names or any sort of personal data. It's sort of like a hardware profile of your system. Now, when a fingerprint gets made, it should be wholly unique. Now, as that unique fingerprint gets passed around, certain websites have trackers. Those trackers' jobs are to look through your cookies or to look through your systems and to actually see if that one fingerprint is bouncing between numerous sites. So for instance, if one browser fingerprint is going to Google and then Reddit and then searching between those various websites, certain data brokers, companies whose job it is to literally harvest data, can literally create a profile off of those unique fingerprints. They might be able to identify who you exactly are based on your fingerprints and your browsing data. And it's not you handing that data over, it's their various trackers identifying every time your cookie is spotted and basically building a profile off of that. Now, a great website for this is privacytest.org, where they do a bunch of tests, a bunch of privacy-focused tests, all open source, by the way, on various browsers. So here you got Brave, Chrome, Edge, Firefox, Opera, LibreWolf, Safari, Tor, an ungoogled Chrome, which is just basically Chrome without any form of, Google, appliances within it, and of course, Vivaldi. Now, in this case, you can see that in some cases, certain browsers like Google Chrome fails a lot of these state partitioning tests, but Brave passes it with flying colors. And there's a lot of cases where Brave kind of beats out the competition, but of course, it's up to you to pick which browser you necessarily want. Now, of course, I typically go with the one that has the most checks in this list, which is Brave, and that's pretty much how I choose to go about my form of browsing on the internet. The further you can go into privatizing your internet, basically making sure that you're not as unique as you claim you are on the internet, that is the best that you can go. Now, of course, there's another way that I can show you in person how this works. This is the EFF Cover Your Tracks website, which basically shows you if your browser has fingerprints, if your browser is, identifiable. Now, in this case, what you can see over here is underneath Brave browser, I have gotten a randomized fingerprint, which means for the most part, websites that are tracking me are going to have a harder time than if, say, I use something like Google Chrome. Now, in fact, here's Google Chrome under the same testing, and it says that my browser isn't blocking ads. Actually, this isn't Google Chrome. This is just Chromium built from source. I didn't download Google Chrome. I just used the source, the original Chromium, right? Obviously, if you don't know, Chrome is an open source project. Chrome is also Google Chrome. It's also Brave browser. It's also Microsoft Edge. Realistically, when you're downloading Edge or you're downloading Chrome or you're downloading Brave, you're effectively downloading the same browser in the background. Anyways, you can see that this browser over here is not protecting me from fingerprinting. It's given a unique fingerprint, which means privacy-wise, Brave is giving me better protections against these trackers and data brokers. So now that you know all of that, the reality of what I'm trying to get at with you over here is trying to protect yourself in the best possible ways is something that you need to do. And of course, when it comes to mobile applications, it gets a little bit different. Obviously, when you download TikTok's mobile application, Twitter's mobile application, Facebook's mobile application, you're subjecting your personal user data on your device to be handed over to these companies. And they can do whatever they want with it. They could sell it to a third party, they could use it to basically build a better profile on you, or they can send it to another third party or a group that they're affiliated with for another nefarious purpose, okay? It depends on what their privacy policies say, and it depends on like how far of permissions you give on your device to these services. Now, of course, at the end of the day, when it comes to TikTok, the real question you have to ask is, obviously, as you've installed their application, as you use their services, the information they can grab on you is, at least in their words, stored in the United States. Could it be taken and sent over to the other side of the world? That has not been denied yet, and that's one of the questions that people should push hardcore. Do I believe that TikTok should have a national ban? I don't think so. I like to believe we live in a part of the world where we have the choice to download whatever applications that we want. I would never personally use TikTok, but I think banning it would put us on sort of the same level as the Chinese government, who I also don't have real sympathy for because they banned pretty much every foreign company from operating in their waters too. I just like to believe I want to have the freedom to give up my data whether I want to or not. Now, at the end of the day, when it comes to this service, should you use TikTok? I think you should ask that question for every social media service that you use. It's not TikTok you should be worried about. The only reason TikTok is really scary is the Chinese government could potentially gather whatever information they wanted on you. TikTok is already being investigated for basically giving up reporter information to the Chinese government. Whether that happened or it didn't is something that's going to be coming out, hopefully, as that investigation matures. But that's one of the questions you have to ask yourself. If you are using any social media service, regardless of who it is, from what country, you are giving up an amount of data that you may not be comfortable with. And I think the real answer to this is not banning TikTok, it's regulating the entire tech sphere as a whole. I think a lot of the mobile operating systems that we have and a lot of the services that we rely on should absolutely be neutered in many ways to prevent a lot of this cross-site tracking and a lot of the spying on actual users. Because what's happening is legitimate spying. And I think a lot of people, if you are questioning your data safety, that's good. You should question your privacy and your rights to that. But you should also be looking into matters like different browsers, or maybe not using certain applications on your mobile cellular devices if you don't feel entirely comfortable giving up your data. Because if you think TikTok is doing this, it probably is. But at the same time, so is Facebook, so is Twitter, so is YouTube. Every social media service is spying on you, is tracking you to no end. And if you find TikTok to be creepy, which you should, the answer isn't to just ban it. The answer is to basically try cutting yourself off from as many of these services as you reasonably can. Look, it's not easy to live off the grid. I'm not saying you should live off the grid. I'm just saying you should curb your digital footprint and make sure that the data you produce isn't just floating around willy-nilly to be sold off to advertisers. Anyways, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. This video has gone on too long, but hopefully the message has been delivered. This is me, Mudahar, and if TikTok gets banned, well, YouTube Shorts about to get a lot worse. I am out.